Scott Lucas is a professor of international politics, Clinton Institute, University College Dublin. Professor Scott is joining us live from Birmingham. Professor, welcome to the show. Quick question, can there be a ceasefire after US vetoed it at the United Nations?
You'll need to ask the Israeli government that. We're now in a situation, as we are in the third month of this cycle of violence, started by Hamas, but then continued by Israel, where the Israeli War Cabinet has decided on an open-ended war. That's an open-ended war in terms of that it will last as long as they think it necessary to, quote, destroy Hamas, or until their own domestic population turns against them, which I don't think will happen. And it is a war not just against Hamas, but it is a war against Gaza civilians. Because there is no way, even if Israel wanted to protect Gaza civilians, which it shows in no indication that it wants to do so, that in such a densely populated area with 1.8 million of the 2.3 million population displaced, that those civilians can be protected from the air and the ground assaults.
Professor, what does this veto essentially mean, in your own view?
Well, I think it means specifically for the United States that the U.S. Has, in effect, accepted this open-ended Israeli war. I don't think it's the case. Quite often you have the myth that the U.S. always supports Israel, that it's unconditional support. I think it's quite clear that the U.S. and most of the international community for weeks tried to keep the Israelis from going in with the ground offensive, from going in with the all-out bombing. But at the end of the day, when the Israeli War Cabinet made their decision, especially after the week-long humanitarian pause ended a couple of weeks ago, once the Israelis made that decision, they were going to show leverage by at least abstaining on a Security Council resolution for a ceasefire, if not supporting it, like France did yesterday. Or secondly, and probably even more importantly, the United States had to cut military assistance to Israel. But instead of doing that, the United States has provided more than 15,000 bombs to Israel since October 7th. More than 10,000 of those bombs are unguided bombs. In other words, they don't precisely hit Hamas targets, they hit anything. And the U.S. has provided more than 50,000 shells. And President Biden said yesterday that they will provide another 45,000. So yes, without taking sides, without supporting any political statements, the U.S. is now enabling the Israeli open-ended attacks on Hamas and on the Gazan civilians.
Finally, Professor, your reaction to Saudi Foreign Minister saying Arab states are not going to intervene militarily in the Israel-Hamas war?
Well, I think there's a series of motives here. I mean, specifically for the Saudis. Remember that, up until October 7th, they were, discussing the normalization of relations with Israel. They were already trying to build up economic links. The Saudis had not ruled out returning to those normalization talks once the violence stops in Gaza. So there's no way they want a head-on clash with the Israelis. A state like Jordan, its main concern right now is ensuring that the violence doesn't spill over into its territory, which has always been a bit fragile in terms of with a large number of Palestinians who live there. And other Arab states, quite frankly, do not want to square up to the Israelis, both specifically because of, that is putting themselves at risk, but also because if you have a wider war with Israel, that also raises the prospect of Iran trying to take advantage, not only through Palestinian groups, but also through a group like Hezbollah.
Scott Lucas is a professor of international politics, Clinton Institute, University College Dublin. Professor Scott, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.